But within that, this guy you don't know, so he's just kind of hanging out up here. Usually, for our guests, when you come for the first time, we make you sit by the pastor while he does the sermon. But
just to make sure you're going to act right.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want to give you a mic or not, Joe. You kind of scared me just a little bit. He's got me a couple good times today. You're on right now. But with the video today, what I kind of want to dig into is we're going into Back to Church Sundays. I want to talk about stories. Most specifically, I want to talk about testimonies. And I'm going to explain what that means as we go. But just really want to kind of get some foundation built with some different folks and sharing their story of how they have come to Christ or how they've come to church and Christian community in their lives. And as part of that, I wanted to introduce you guys to Joe. Joe and I met, was about 2 months, 3 months now? I lose time.
2, 3, 4 months.
Okay, thereabouts. And
sometime in the last millennia.
Sometime in the last millennia. And you're gonna have to use that thing, remember? Okay. And but as you know, we've been working on the kitchen, different things here, and the last thing we have on the kitchen is a new stove. And so I went over to Sears' hometown, am I saying correctly, Joe? Over at the mall. And Joe was the man on duty. He's the guy that was working that day. And I was wearing a TSF shirt, and that started a conversation. Joe goes over to Central Baptist with Pastor Ryan, who's a troublemaker of his own sorts. And Joe got to share with me his testimony, and he's passionate about what God has done in his life. And so he has been gracious to say, if God ever raises it up, I'd be more happy to come share with your church. And today he's raising it up. So, Joe, if you want to share your story, I know you are good to go. You don't need me.
I want to read from 2 Corinthians 5. Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. Jesus Christ died for my sins. The truth of that and the reality of that, I realized in a filthy, stinking jail cell in Louisville, Kentucky. Unfortunately, jail was nothing new to me. At that point in my life, I'd spent 15 and a half years in prison, and I was facing a very simple situation. I was going to spend the rest of my life in prison. It probably won't surprise anybody. When I was growing up over in Coshocton, my plan for my life was not to become a convict. But I grew up weak. My dad decided before I was born I wasn't his son, and I was raised with a lot of hate and bitterness and anger. And there's something about a kid. If you give him hate, bitterness, and anger, what are you going to get back? Hate, bitterness, and anger. And I hated my dad. From my childhood, I can't remember a day I didn't hate my dad. But the lesson I learned from my dad was, I'm a loser. I'm no good. I'm rotten. And I spent a good portion of my life doing everything I could to prove my dad right. When I was in high school, I discovered sex. And it grabbed a hold of me. Result of it was that my girlfriend got pregnant. Told me just before I graduated from high school over in Coshocton. Right after I graduated, she said, we need to go talk to Mom and Dad. I said, okay, we'll do that tomorrow. And today I left town. Ended up in St. Louis. Joined the Navy. Went out to Hospital Corps School in San Diego after boot camp. I got in trouble in the Navy, and they told me they didn't want me anymore. And I just kind of started roaming around the country. Ended up in Oklahoma City, broke and desperate. And Satan put me together with another guy that was broke and desperate, only he knew a place we could get $40,000 or $50,000 out of. It was an all-night supermarket he'd used to work in. So one Wednesday evening, we went in and robbed it. Now, there was about 18 months between the time that Rusty had worked there and that we robbed it. and things had changed. Instead of having a Cracker Jack safe in the floor that you could open with a screwdriver, they had a new Mosler safe in the floor that you couldn't open with an atomic bomb. We got $54.17 out of that cash register. That didn't do either one of us much good, so a few nights later we robbed another place and got a few $100. About a week later, I found out that Rusty had taken the wallet of the guy we robbed, and he got caught using the credit cards. And he screamed my name loud enough to hear all the way across Oklahoma City. And I got arrested. And I was in trouble. But I didn't have any idea what kind of trouble I was in. I mean, I was a red-blooded, all-American boy. Hollywood had taught me, when you get broke and busted, you do something about it, right? And I did. And I got arrested. Anybody got any idea what the penalty was for armed robbery in 1967 in Oklahoma? The minimum penalty was 5 years. The maximum penalty was the electric chair. And the last person in Oklahoma electrocuted, which was in 1965, was for armed robbery. I was lucky. They only gave me 20 years. And they sent me to the Oklahoma State Penitentiary and then to the Oklahoma State Reformatory. You got to understand something. I weighed 113 pounds. Blonde hair, blue-eyed kid. I had hair then. And I knew I was going to have problems in the penitentiary. Somebody was going to want this fair white body. So the first day I was on the yard, I asked around to find out who the toughest guy in the yard was, and they told me it was Pete Rollins. I walked up to Pete and I said, listen, I hear you've been talking about me. That's as far as I got. Pete hit me one time. Busted my nose open, busted my lips open. I fell down, he walked off. A few minutes later, I picked myself up and went and got cleaned up. Later that night, Pete came up behind me in the chow line. He said, what was that stupidity about out there this afternoon? I told him, well, look at me. I weigh 113 pounds. I knew I'm having trouble in prison. But I figured if I got in a fight with you, everybody else would leave me alone. Pete looked at me and said, you're crazy, man. That became my name in the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, Crazy Man. And for years, I lived every day with the attitude, I'm going to be so crazy today, everybody's going to leave me alone. After a period of time, I got paroled. That didn't last long. After about a month and a half, I jumped parole, went on the run, started robbing banks. Made a willful decision that when I got arrested, I was going to have federal time because I wasn't going back to McAllister. Guess what? I got arrested. And I got federal time. I got charged with 5 bank robberies. They gave me 30 years and sent me to Leavenworth. Now, you have to understand something. I was raised in church. My family went to church for all the right reasons. My dad went to church because it was good for business. My mom went to church for the socializing. And us kids, we went to church because we didn't have any say in it. But there wasn't anything real about it. When I started going to prison, every once in a while I'd go to chapel. Not very often, but once in a while I'd go to chapel. I'd go to chapel so I could look at myself and tell myself, you're not like all these other animals. You're okay. You go to chapel. But there wasn't anything real about it. I did 10 years in that 30-year sentence. A whole decade of my life gone. I got out. I paroled out to Santa Barbara, California. But I didn't have any foundation for my life. I didn't have anything to build on. So when the problems and the pressures and the troubles of life came along, because they do, I didn't have any way to handle them. So after about 2 years, I just kind of threw my hands up in the air and I said, I don't need this, I'm leaving, goodbye. And I went on the run again. Ended up in Louisville, decided to rob a bank. I robbed a bank, and through a series of flukes that you couldn't sell this story to Hollywood because it's so unbelievable, I got caught. I got thrown in the county jail in Louisville. And like I said earlier, I was facing a very simple situation. I was facing a brand new bank robbery I had no chance of beating and a 20-year parole violation. And the feds have a very simple attitude about parole violation. We gave you a chance and you blew it. We're going to bury you. To give you an idea of how strong that attitude is, I did a total of 16 and a half years in the federal prison system. In 16 and a half years, the only person that I know who ever got a second parole, you're looking at him, and it wasn't him. In the county jail in Louisville, I got thrown into a drunk tank with about 45 other guys. A room maybe half the size of this room with 45 people in it. There were 4 bunks, 2 double bunks. And apparently there was somebody in the drunk tank that thought he was running things. And the guard told him, leave this guy alone because he's already done more than 15 years in prison, and he will take your head off. One of the bunks was empty, so I went and sat down on it. And there was a Gideon Bible on it. And I picked it up, and it fell open to John 3:16. And I'd heard that verse a lot in my life. But it had never meant anything. I picked that Bible up, and I started reading John 3:16 over and over and over again. And before long, I was reading it through tears. And I prayed a very, very simple prayer. I said, God, my whole life, I've heard that you want me. I don't understand that. I'm no good. I'm a liar. I'm a cheat. I'm a thief. There is absolutely nothing good about me. But if you want me, here I am, take me. And he did. And he performed a miracle. Salvation is a miracle. But right after that miracle, he gave me another miracle. Because the only thing I'd ever known was hate, anger, bitterness, poison. And in an instant, God emptied me of that. And God can't stand an empty vessel. So in the place of all those negative things, he gave me his joy and his peace and his love. Anybody got any idea what my next prayer was? Come on, you guys are smarter than that. What was my next prayer? Get me out of here. So I went to court and I got 20 years on the new count. And they filed the 20-year parole violation on me. Sent me back to Leavenworth. And like I say, I was going to spend the rest of my life in prison. At Leavenworth, I put in to see the parole board, knowing there was no chance of a second parole. But as long as I had the detainer on me for the parole violation, I had to stay at a maximum security penitentiary and couldn't go anywhere else. So I put in to see the parole commission. A week before I was supposed to meet the parole commission, I got sent to the hole. I didn't do anything. A guy owed me some money. He put a homemade handcuff key in my cell and called the captain about it. So I went to the parole commission in orange dungarees, orange jumpsuit, chained and shackled. But God didn't care about that. Doesn't matter what circumstances you place yourself in, God's bigger than them. And the parole commission recommended I be re-paroled after 120 months, 10 years. 10 years is a long time. Beats the day out of forever. I came out of the parole board room praising God for a miracle. And it was. But it wasn't enough of a miracle for God. Now, the procedure is you go in front of the parole commission, three members of the parole commission. They make a recommendation to the regional parole commission. 21 days later, you get a notice of action telling you what they're going to do officially. 21 days later, my notice of action came in. At the top of it, it said they could do one of four things. They could go 6 months over or 6 months under that 120-month date. They could say, no, we're not going to take that recommendation. We're going to have you see the parole commission again in X number of months. Or they could say, we're not going to make the decision at the regional level. We're going to send your case to the National Parole Commission. Or they could say, no, we're not giving you a parole, just do your time. The important one of those was the first one. They could go 6 months over or 6 months under that 120-month date. Right after they said that, they said they were knocking 40 months off of it to re-parole me at the minimum of my new sentence. Let me put it in perspective for you. The United States Parole Commission, Regional Parole Commission out of Kansas City, Missouri, broke the law to give me a parole. And I believe with all my heart, it was a matter that God had things He wanted me to do. I couldn't do them at Leavenworth. I did 6.5 years and I got paroled. I paroled out to Peoria, Illinois. This time I had a foundation for my life. This time I had help. I've been out 26 years now. And things haven't always been real easy. Things haven't always been real sweet. But God has always been there with me. Doesn't matter how tough the times got. It didn't matter what happened. God was there. Jesus Christ died for my sins. Real quickly, I want to tell you a story as I close. All of us are in one of three situations. We either know the Lord and we're trying to follow Him. That's the first group. The second group, maybe at one point you were walking with the Lord, but something's come between you and Him and you've pulled away. That's the second group. The third group, you never heard about Christ. Or if you've heard about Him, you've never accepted Him. I want you to come back with me now to the day He died. He's in the garden with His followers. Satan comes and betrays Him with a kiss on the cheek. And Satan's there too. Satan is happy. Satan thinks, if I can just destroy this man, I win. I think Christ looked at Satan and said, I'm doing this for Joe, and he's worth it. And they took him to Pilate. And Pilate put him in front of the mob. And the mob hollers, crucify him. And Satan's dancing around happy. I think Christ told Satan, I'm doing this for Joe, and he's worth it. They beat him. They whipped him. They drove a crown of thorns into his head. And while Satan was laughing at him and telling him he was a fool to be messing with these humans, I think Christ told Satan, I'm doing this for Joe, and he's worth it. And they took him to Calvary. They nailed him to that cross. They hung him there to die by suffocation, because that's how you die when you get crucified. Your body just gets so heavy your diaphragm won't work and you can't breathe. And Satan was dancing around the foot of that cross. And I think the last thing Christ said to Satan was, I'm doing this for Joe, and he's worth it. God thought a no good, lying, cheating, robbing, thieving bank robber was worth the cross. And I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that I understand that kind of love, because I don't. I don't understand a love that would take the creator of the world to a cross for me. But I'm so thankful for it. God has blessed me so richly, I can't begin to tell you. In 10 minutes or 5 hours, I couldn't begin to tell you. I just give him the glory and the praise. Somebody mentioned to me one time that I have a great testimony. 2 things about that. First of all, I don't agree. I will tell you a great testimony. Here's a great testimony. I gave my life to the Lord when I was 4 years old, and I've walked with him ever since. That's a great testimony. I've got a dramatic testimony. I've got a useful testimony, but it's not a good testimony. The other thing is, it's not my testimony. It's God's testimony of what he's done in my life, through me and for me. I just praise him. And I thank you for your time this morning. God bless.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, my friend. I'll trade you. Give you that back. Thanks. Thanks, brother.